All right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have Raymond Anderson of Nation of No One, also of Whiskey, Stills, and Hash. Singer, songwriter, composer, does it all. He's got a new album out called And Whatnot, available on Bandcamp and SoundCloud under Nation of No One. Raymond also has a show coming at the Matinee in Akron with Rent for Cheryl, Applewhites, Frantic Nancy's, and Nation of No One. And that's March 2nd in Akron at the Matinee. So check it out. Check out the tunes. We're going to listen to one of the tunes off And Whatnot. This is the song High Score. High Score, Nation of No One, available on SoundCloud and Bandcamp. Check it out. This was cool because this tune in particular kind of drew on the video game inspiration Raymond has in his music that we talk about in the conversation. Anyway, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast and any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Raymond and sharing their insights with you. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Raymond. Dig it. Okay, when you send me the link, I was like, you got a lot of records, man.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think it's at 14 full lengths now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And like diving into it, I was like, all right, well, I'll start with the one you sent me, the Music Schizophrenia.
Music Schizophrenia.
I was
pretty close.
Yeah. I was like, I gotta figure out how I'm supposed to say this. One more time, Music
Schizophrenia.
And like I listened to that one the most because I mean that's the freshest one, at least what you sent me. But is it because no or whatever is like, or no and Whatnot, is that newer?
And Whatnot is the album I released after Music Schizophrenia. That's
Okay.
my newest record.
Okay, cool. So all right, and Whatnot, got it. Because like
Yep.
For some reason on my phone, SoundCloud's like wonky. I don't know. But okay, both. So I dove into those two the most, but also, also looking at some of your earlier releases, the very first one, it sounded like the first track sounded kind of like a video game soundtrack, and I guess I wanted to dive into are you a gamer? Does gaming kind of affect some of your scoring?
Oh, constantly.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a huge influence from video games, either directly or indirectly, that impact my music.
Well, I guess we'll start with that. So, like with gaming, were you an Xbox guy? Were you a PlayStation guy? Were you like a GameCube guy? Because we're kind of around the same age. Like as far as how far does it go back? Were you a Game Boy kid? Like what?
Yeah. I had a Game Boy. The first console I ever had, although I will admit it didn't leave a super huge impression on me, was a Super Nintendo. I had like Mario Paint, Super Mario World, some of the Donkey Kong Country games. Wasn't really big into the Nintendo stuff. I got really deeper into gaming, though, when my parents bought me a PlayStation 2. And I'm kind of like a Sony bro for life now. I have a PS4, and that's what I game most on now.
Sick. Was it? It was back then. Like I remember like my family we only had Nintendo stuff growing up, and like when someone said they had a PlayStation, in my head I thought of it as like a little jungle gym. You know what I mean? Like I was very confused in like elementary school. What's a PlayStation? Like
yeah.
But there's definitely they had the games, man. With Mario Paint, was that the one where you can compose on it, right? They had that like music.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It had like its own scoring system, and you can use a lot of the sound fonts and effects that were used in the Mario games to write music.
Did you do that?
I wish. I don't have access to the sound font. Oh, do you mean if I did it back then?
Yeah.
No, I didn't have much of an interest in music back then.
Okay. Because like that, I mean, that's pretty clutch now. I mean, to take some of those files and drop them into some MIDI shit would be cool. So I guess all right. So gaming definitely affected. What was it? Was it playing games and being affected by the music whilst playing them that kind of left a mark with you, or was it like
It really depends on the song. Okay. There's a piece of music I wrote called Dark Cloud 3.
Yeah.
which is the title is a reference to a video game I used to like called Dark Cloud or Dark Chronicle, depending on which translation you're going by. It's a JRPG, and there was no Dark Cloud 3. They only made 2 of them. A high score off of And Whatnot was very inspired by video game music. That's why it has all those synths and stuff in the background. I approached Cyborg, the guy who is featured on that track, to help me kind of put that together, and he did a splendid job with it. He has a good blend of like sensibility for that kind of thing.
Find the kind of music bug that was planted from the video game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I get it, like, aside from playing games and kind of being immersed in that, like, when did music start for you? And what was it? Was it guitar? Was it piano?
So my musical journey kind of started way back in high school. Um, I don't know what really possessed me that day to do the things I did, but I had a CD player that I was able to acquire from my father, and I basically just kind of stole a few of his CDs and started listening to them, and I was just like really enthralled by it. The first album I ever had was AC/DC Live at Donington, which I took from Dad. He didn't really mind much because he didn't like that era of AC/DC, but I thought it was pretty stellar. Then shortly after, I went out and bought some new CDs of my own. The first 3 CDs I bought were AC/DC Highway to Hell, which that was the era of AC/DC my dad liked with Bon Scott. And then I bought Legend by Bob Marley and the Black Album by Metallica.
Okay. Those are 3 heavy hitters in completely different ways.
Oh, yeah.
AC/DC is where I started too. Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Nice.
I think it.
I loved Angus. He was such a great, not just a great guitar player, but a great showman.
Right, and like, well, it's just like that embodiment of cool. You know what I mean? Like you think rock
Yeah.
and roll, and it's cool in the sense where it is over the top, but it's not like Kiss. You know, where it's over the top, and you're like, I feel like there's something authentic here. Not that you had those thoughts as a kid, or not that I did. I don't know, but like you're like, there's something here. And like they're like the Ramones in the sense where it's like same formula almost every time. I can get behind this. I get it.
I mean, like, that's good for branding. It gives recognition.
Right. But I don't know. I don't think they were thinking about that. I think they just like I'm sure later they were, but like in the Highway to Hell era, like that was one of my first. Yeah.
Phenomenal. Bon Scott was an amazing singer too.
Yeah. Okay, so you're cracking into that. You got Metallica going too, which is another one of those things. Like if you catch it at that age, you're like, "Oh, this is the sickest shit." Like,
yeah. And so from there, that's where my interest in music started. But I didn't really have much of an ambition to be a writer until after I was introduced to System of a Down. Something about that music made me think, "Wow, it's not enough for me to listen to this. I want to do something like this." Then I also discovered Frank Zappa, and he opened me up to a whole new world of like things that I never even really conceived possible to be done with music. And from there, with my expanded horizons, I tried to branch out into as many different fields of composition as I could. And Music Schizophrenia was a pretty good example of that. If you'll recall, when we first became acquainted, I actually sent you an album released under my own name, which was called The Great Zambini. They were very, very poor demo quality recordings at the time, but the pieces themselves, I think, had a lot of value. So Music Schizophrenia takes a lot of those original concepts, and I refined it with my more efficient mixing and mastering skills, and re-released it on that album.
No shit. Wow.
Yep.
Damn. That's cool, man. Like, so okay, so diving into like, because System of a Down, like I remember in high school they were kind of everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Did someone show you Zappa, or did you find Zappa through listening to an interview with them, or like how did Zappa come into your view?
Well, Serge Tankian spoke very glowingly about Zappa's work, and he even did a cover of Don't Eat the Yellow Snow and Nanook
Okay.
rubs it. That was pretty damn good. My father talked about Zappa too. I can't really say if my interest was piqued from either him or from Serge Tankian talking about it, but it was one of those two.
Because like there was something like with System of Down, they're so precise and it's so tight, but also at the same time it's got this like humor and like
Oh
you know
yeah,
what I mean. Like it there's something about like when someone installs like something that's humorous, like it's putting down this guard in a way, and like it makes it seem more possible. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like in partly because of how unique his voice is and like how unique their approach is, like you're like, oh shit, if they can do something that them, I can do something that me. At least that's what I thought when I like really dove into System. Um, so like, and then to dive into Zappa. Now, like, as far as like, were you playing anything at that time, or is this just you taking in music?
Yeah, so I formed a Nation of No One with friends and classmates during high school. We had a very short run. We played one of the last shows at Peabody's.
Nice.
I think we opened for the Misfits. It was
Was it a guerrilla production thing?
probably, unfortunately. I know
Oh,
we did play with a when I had to reform the lineup many years later. We did play a show at the Agora, and I know for a fact that was done through Guerrilla Productions, and I met a lot of other musicians there that I would be doing a lot of work with many years later. But yeah, a lot of my earlier shows was with what that crappy organization. Can I curse, by the way? Because I was
yeah,
about
yeah,
to
that's fine.
say something meaner about
Yeah,
them. Yeah, that city organization.
for anyone who's listening who doesn't recall, Guerrilla Productions, what they were, right, was this production company, primarily, from my understanding, just through Peabody's. Like maybe after Peabody shut down, like they were also they were they for anywhere else? I only dealt with them at Peabody's.
I thought they were like interstate. I thought they were a bit of a bigger organization, but yeah, no. After Peabody shot down, they went through the Agora too, so
Okay,
they were around for a little bit longer.
but anyway, it's a production company, and when you would sign up for a gig, they had like this pyramid scheme ticket
Yep.
thing going, where you had to sell a certain amount of tickets, and the more tickets you sold, the later your spot went in the night,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
like and what do you remember the cut? So like it was like if you sell 10 tickets, you get a percent of one of your like I can't remember. It was totally fried. Like you would sell like a
Well, it
ticket.
really depended on the show because if it was a battle of the bands, being labeled as a battle of the bands, you didn't get paid shit.
Yeah, but like for like when they would have a giant headliner like the Misfits, right? And
Yep.
like they'd be like, "Do you want to open for the Misfits?" Well, you got to sell a shit ton of tickets, and like, um, and there was still the Misfits bill, right?
Yeah,
Like
it was more or less like that.
they had the Misfits came into town with their touring bill, and like they had bands all day until
Mm-hmm.
that touring bill, and like the closer you can get to the actual touring bill is like actually getting that spot. But or like sometimes they had bands after. But I can't remember the percent. It was like if you sold 10 tickets, you got like for 10 tickets at like $13 a piece, you got like $3 a ticket or $2 a ticket. It was fried.
Yeah, it was a complete scam.
Oh man, I remember going in those like Peabody's at the beginning, going into that dingy office and like here's my tickets. I didn't sell
Yeah.
any. Oh man. Yeah, but Peabody's was cool though. Like aside from all that shit, like the venue itself was kind of cool.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Um,
Sadly, only because I'm such a young guy, like I only managed to like go there really for my show. I didn't really get to spend a whole lot of shows there, just being an audience member.
Neither did I. I mostly played there, and like I remember playing a lot of like wacky bills where we playing upstairs, and you can just but you had to be there at 5 o'clock, and like you may play at like 1, but they
Yeah,
required that every band was there by 5, so we would spend hours just putzing around doing nothing.
yeah, yeah. Don't miss those days.
Yeah, they. I don't either, but I do kind of. I did thinking back. I'm like they were kind of fun. Like we really had to figure out something to do for way too long.
Yeah.
Um,
Usually, what I would do is I would just like read or something while I waited for the show to happen.
yeah. Um, I guess okay. All right. Back to it. So you start the first formation. You open for the Misfits, and like, did you get to mingle with any of those guys? How did that show go?
Oh no, I didn't mingle with anybody like outside of my own friend group, and like I didn't really even get much of a chance to meet the other bands. The Agora show was a little bit different. That was where I saw Midnight Sun play for the first time,
Okay.
and got very well acquainted with the members of that group, and later joined a splinter group. You know them, Whiskey Stills and Hash, and that's kind of like where the impetus for that started for me as well.
So was it? Did you kind of hit it off with Keefe, or who did you like meet first from that group?
Um, Jordan.
Jordan. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was also like running sound for the TLC Tavern shows that was being run by a guy named Vinnie Mac, and he had a thing for local Illyria musicians and bands and whatnot called VMA Productions, and he would release like compilations and stuff, and he would feature a lot of the artists on those compilations at these shows at this dingy little dive bar in Illyria called TLC's Tavern, and that's where I met them all for minus Dan. That's where I met like John Keefe and Jordan for the first time.
Okay. Yeah. Jordan's the coolest man. That guy.
Yeah.
He hustles hard. He's doing like so much shit, and I'm glad to see him like rising to the top with some of this stuff because that dude's been hustling in so many different fields.
Oh yeah.
I ran into him. I don't know if he's still at Guitar Center, but I ran into him. He was doing a guitar repair or guitar setups. I'm like this
Yeah,
guy.
last time I spoke to him, he still was working at Guitar Center.
Okay, like Jordan just makes it work, man. Like that's someone like I find super inspiring. Like just whatever it is, he's still doing music. He's got his family going. He's doing all the things and he's incorporating it. Like last time, he was telling me some crazy cool stories where he brought his daughter to some shows he was running at Nelson's, and the bands were like being super cool with her, and she was like having the time of her life. It's like awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so you play those shows, you meet those guys, and
hmm
like, what was the like? I guess kind of like being a project that you're writing all the songs, right? Or how's this working with are you presenting it to the group? Or are you working with the group to come up with these songs?
So how I originally ended up joining Whiskey Stills and Hash, I actually hired Jordan to perform on one of my recordings. The piece
Okay.
was called Comma,
Okay.
and that was released on an album called No Artistic Value. He played drums, of course, and I can't remember where the name of the guy that we recorded it, but it was at his house. He had a home studio. The guy ended up getting out of the recording music business, and now he works for Sweetwater. His name was like Dan Vranick or something like that. Yeah, but after that, he invited me to join the band. I had a piece of music that was eventually recorded on our debut release called Year of the Platypus. And that song went through quite a few different changes. That was a very Zappa inspired piece, too. So when I originally conceived the piece, I came up with this ridiculous story about like some guy who writes music and has like this harebrained scheme to create a micro universe in which it is ideal. And he wants to do this through music. And so what he does is he hires a bunch of overpaid union members to play a shitty little orchestra spiel in a studio. And as the music cranks along, the reality of the world slowly just slips away. And it's replaced with a vision of San Francisco. And within the city of San Francisco, a giant kaiju monster called Plantarg the Giant Platypus comes and starts destroying it. So a superhero crew called not the I think it was like because the Avengers is Marvel. I think I named it like the Revengers or something like that, something silly like that. But they fight the monster to a piece of music called Year of the Platypus. And
That's sick.
the live idea behind it was supposed to include a lot of like day-to-day improvisation and stuff like that. But that didn't really end up coming to fruition. It became a little bit more composed as the other band members added their own little thing to it, and we kind of settled down into a routine of how it's supposed to be played. So sadly, it didn't really achieve the vision I originally had, but I am pretty satisfied with what it became nonetheless.
It's interesting a being like an idea guy, or from where you're at, coming with an idea of like, here's a narrative, and like trying to work with a group like this as far as something that's like kind of improv and like made up in the moment. Like that process itself is really like it's interesting because the idea itself slowly changes to fit what's growing. Like what you're,
Mhm.
it's kind of like chiseling away at a cube to see the character that's going to be there. Um, is that a process is that something you're more comfortable with? Is that like usually what you do, or is this like a group dynamic?
Well, my approach to music just generally is that I try not to treat the material as like a static quantity. To me, music is living and life implies motion and change. So obviously, I believe music should be able to do this as well. And depending on the intuitiveness of the person performing the piece, you can do a lot of different things that you might not be able to imagine in a studio setting or just like writing on a piece of paper. Like, and when it comes to Whiskey Stills and Hash, like there was a lot of that going on, but I still nonetheless feel like there was a lot of undeveloped potential that we never really reached with the group yet. And when it comes to a lot of my pieces, like the stuff on music schizophrenia, there's a lot of sections that are supposed to have those developing improvs if the music were to ever be performed live. Captain Clam Cake and The Great Zambini would be good examples of this.
Yeah, getting into that record, like kind of diving into it, like when I was listening to it, it like the Zappa thing definitely stuck out to me as far as like, would that be an influence? And after talking with you, yes. Um,
Mm.
but like, it was interesting because like each piece like resolved, like it was very like tension filled, and how it resolved in in a lot of pieces, and like a lot of the movements were like like
Yep.
you're living in that tension filled zone, and it's really cool. But as far as like composing with it, like were you using MIDI stuff? Were you like writing these
Mhm.
out? Like what that process look like?
Yeah, I primarily compose in MIDI. I think
Okay.
there is like some tabs for the guitar parts to Great Zambini and some sheet music somewhere that I've attempted to write, especially for like the prelude, the piano prelude of the Great Zambini. I know I have scored that out at one point, but after a certain point beyond writing in MIDI, I kind of like abandoned writing sheet music because, for one thing, I can't really get people that want to perform the pieces anyways. And sheet music is cool and all to look at, but it's painstaking work to,
Yeah, it is.
write out a score. So it's like, why bother when I can just type it into the MIDI program, and the MIDI program isn't going to complain like, oh, I can't whistle to this, Raymond. It doesn't get me off. The computer just does what I tell it to do. So.
Was it true? True. True. um, broken fingers. Can you tell me a little bit about that one? Because that one is, I felt a lot of tension in that one. Like,
Okay, so I drew a lot of influence from chamber pieces done by a composer by the name of Anton Webern, and
okay,
he
cool.
was part of the Second Viennese School. He was taught by Arnold Schoenberg. He was a composer from Austria. Um, and he had a very refined technique that was imparted to him by Schoenberg that involved approaching the scale of pitches and giving each pitch uh, equal relevance within a piece of music. So some people call it dodecaphony, or my bad, dodecaphony, but basically that just means 12 tone. And that is a huge aspect of what the Broken Finger String Quartet was an attempt at doing. I wanted to give equal relevance to every single pitch in the 12 pitches I could choose from. And that was my first successful attempt at doing this without making any mistakes and without like reusing a pitch too many times.
That's sick. because like I remember learning about tone rolls and learning about 12-tone music
Yeah.
and like, but I've never like and trying to analyze it, but I've never met anyone who's done it. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I wanted to give it a try. So Webern's music is a lot smarter than mine, and he'll formulate his melodies to have like certain elements of repetition that go even beyond just serializing the pitches. Me, on the other hand, I'm also very fascinated with polyrhythm and trying to stick as many notes into a single beat as possible. So it is called the Broken Finger String Quartet because I'm not 100% sure if it's actually even playable. There's a lot of instances of like where I wrote like 9 in the span of 2 beats or 11 in one beat or like stuff like that,
So, but all this is kind of like
5/3 beats.
right, right, right. Like if I was trying to tap everything as I was hearing it, I would lose my fucking mind because like it's everywhere. But knowing this makes it make more sense. Like because I haven't thought about 12 tone stuff in like a minute. Like I haven't since like studying that stuff in school. But um like this is like some higher level theoretical like composing. Like when did like this like going back through all this like diving into Zappa and diving into like System of a Down like and just playing bands in high school like this is like did you dive into like studying composers in high school? Did you go to college for music? Did you like is this just the bug and you chased it down?
No, it's just a bug and I chase it down. I never went to
Yeah.
college.
Okay.
I never, the only schooling I ever got for music was like band stuff in high school. And that was the shit that I really wasn't interested in. The music we played was a huge drag. And like when I was in the marching band, all they made me do was walk backwards with a pair of cymbals being a living holder for a hi hat. And I hated that. So, yeah, no, it was only out of, a desire to know and absorb as much of the musical world that I could possibly get my hands on because I felt like as a composer, it is a requirement to educate yourself on things like that and know what other people are doing. Like, and for as much as I love the works of like Stravinsky, Perez, and Webern, and all those guys from the 20th century and all that jazz, I will admit I've kind of come a bit more to appreciate more modern musicians, and not just in terms of the so-called classical world, but also in terms of like popular music and stuff like that.
Like who I guess like Zorn? Like who are we talking like as far as like
Yeah,
popular?
Zorn is cool. I liked his album Spillane. I also liked his um it because this piece was kind of improvisational too. It was called Cobra, and there was a really good recording that was being distributed on YouTube that sadly I can't find anymore. But there was also several live performances of that kind of music that I thought was pretty stellar. Zorn is cool. I like a guy by the name of Samuel Andreev. He released a piece of music that's very beautiful called Iridescent Notation, and it has a very um, Pierre Boulez type sound. So it was pretty cool.
That's sick. Yeah, I think they just put like all Zorn stuff on Spotify. Like
Nice.
yeah, yeah. My drummer was telling me about that the other day, and I was like, "Whoa, sick!" Because we've been talking. Like, I've been. Have you read any of his Arcana books? Like those.
Nah.
Okay, he like it's kind of like it's like I guess a composer's zine. Like it's like a thick. Like he's an editor of it, but it's just compiled a bunch of other musicians and crazy ideas or theoretical ideas, compositions. It's all over the place. But it's just like it's the best way I can think to title it is like a zine for like like higher thinking. Like, but that's awesome,
Yeah.
man.
I have a playlist of several presently living composers on my SoundCloud that features music from primarily 3 artists, one of them being Samuel Andreev. Iridescent Notation was not on SoundCloud, but his Sonata de Carrera is in the playlist, as well as pieces by a guy named Magdi Hameda and Gary Noland.
So even kind of looking at music through a composition's lens, right? You're looking at like a higher written, like not higher, I should say, a larger written piece, and like it takes a different kind of like train of thought or train of like appreciating music to really want to know how this works and to really be inspired by how it works. Like, And I guess kind of going back to like the video game composition, you're following this piece and you're playing it in a way because it's interacting with the character you are
Yeah.
within the game that you're playing. So did I guess like were you always kind of like thinking in a bigger picture like this? Were you hearing pieces and like following like motifs where they come in and when they come out like that, diving into music from the rip?
Oh yeah, I mean, like when it comes to especially larger scale pieces, whenever there's like repetitions of themes, like to me, that's like as important as like certain character tropes or actions being done in movies and what have you. Like I feel like it's important to like tell a story with music, and at the very least, it gets people way more interested in what you're trying to do.
And I guess my follow up to that would there be like a piece um even if it's like a video game piece or something at a younger age like whilst diving into ACDC that really made you like think and want to write in that larger compositional sense.
A lot of the soundtrack for Kingdom Hearts, like
Yeah,
I was very influenced by that stuff back then.
dude, that was right out. You didn't even think about that. That came right out. That game was sick. Like,
And Dark Cloud. Dark Cloud was too. A lot of JRPG type music really
okay,
influenced me.
that's awesome, man. Like, uh, working with like kids at work, like, I teach. I end up teaching a lot of video game music, right? And it made
Yeah.
me think about it differently. Like, we learn little bits of themes from just like whatever from Mario or from all them kids are into the Megalovania.
Oh
Like,
yeah. I mean, like speaking of that guy, I mean, like he was just generally a good composer, not
yeah,
just a game maker, and he did use the sound font from Mario Paint to use a lot of those pieces. I mean, to
that's
use in
sick.
those
I did not
pieces.
know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But that's a great. That's like a blues scale. So like, all right. Anyway, so your mind's in this compositional space, and like playing with whiskey stills and hash, like that's kind of a balance of like the of a band in a way. You know what I mean? Like there's compositions, but it's more grounded into like a like you would see it at a show. So kind of like that duality. Was it easy to fit in with that?
Uh, Not really. No, it
Okay.
was kind of hard, and I still struggle with it if I'm being 100% honest. But yeah, no. When it comes to whiskey stills and hash, like the creative elements are all just kind of like a contribution from the individual members. Some things stick better than others, and we just kind of have to work it out and figure it out as we go along.
And like,
No,
so
I will admit I kind of am a little bit hard to work with when it comes to like songwriting and stuff.
was it well, is it do you find it's that sense because you're thinking in a larger scale and like trying to resolve to this plot point at the end of whatever it is? And
It it's partially because of that. It's also partially because like I'll bring music to people, and this is just generally. It's not just with my band, but I'll just bring music to people generally, and it's I don't think they really get why I would write the way I do, or like, because I also include a lot of elements of humor sometimes, or like, but then people will think I'm serious, or I'll treat like really, really intense negative emotions in a piece of music as a way to kind of like section those feelings away from me and create like a form of self therapy. But I feel like it ends up creating something that can be kind of off-putting to people, so like it's not always easy for me to like convince people of my ideas and stuff like that because of those reasons.
right, right. Well, and that's as a songwriter or a composer or anyone that's putting their own self out there. That's like the most scary moment is like when you show them the song and you're like, I don't know. Like it takes a long
Uh-huh.
time to get a group of people to like to even buy into what you're saying. You know what I mean? And like once that exists, it's different. You know what I mean? Like you feel you like you got this backing to it.
Yeah.
But it's a very that's a very delicate thing that can very well that can go from super supported to like man I don't like that idea really fucking
Yeah.
quick. Like um but that's like I mean just to kind of be is that I guess that looking at the amount of output Nation of No One has, is it partly because of that? Is it like having these like really like kind of getting these emotions out in a way no one else will allow you to? Is that why? Like,
Definitely.
okay.
Yeah. That is one of the driving forces behind how I approach my music, especially with a lot of the music on and whatnot. Because, like, with music schizophrenia, that was just like an attempt purely at creating something that would be like really musically far out, really like just in depth. But the themes aren't very explicit, only implied. Whereas and whatnot, a lot of the themes are far more explicit and in some cases really dark.
Even but sonically, some of it has like a this punk like almost poppy element to it. Diving
Mm.
and it may have been because I jumped into these far out compositions first. You know what I mean? I jumped
So
into
yeah, I
that.
bet and whatnot sounded like it. This
It
sounds like a
sound,
completely different band.
well, and that's then I started to really get into it. Some of the earlier, like on your first release, I'm like, one of this, the second song sounds like a Metallica tune. I'm like, this this guy's everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Um, but okay. So like with that, and I saw that you're playing live in Akron, right? Nation No One
Yeah,
is
I
doing the
just
gig.
posted about that recently. I'm going to be doing like as far as it is going to be set up now, and I'm rehearsing it as such. It's going to be an acoustic set.
Okay.
It's going to include some music from and whatnot, some music from a future release I have planned for this year, which is titled "The Furnace." I still have to make the album art for it and record bass for the title track. I got a guy who wants to record bass for it, and that was going to be like his little tryout thing for live performances because I would like to put a group together eventually to play some of this music more often. It just hasn't like manifested. But if that goes well, great. We unfortunately haven't been able to meet yet, though.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that pans out and like, because I was gonna ask like, with like a catalog that's so all over the place, like when it comes to performing live, what's that look like? And I mean, you just answered it with the going solo dolo and pulling different pieces from the newest release. But like,
Yep.
um, with this next coming release, is it anything like what we've heard so far? Like, is it pulling from any of these to kind of to pry at that for a moment? Is Furnace going to be prying at some of these crazy compositions, or is it going to be looking more like this last release?
There's actually going to be a little bit of a balance between those two forces. I think it leans a little bit closer to the kind of style I cultivated on and whatnot. But it's also going to have certain sections of the more complex and or just generally weird stuff on it as well that didn't really have a home. The whole album itself is mostly pieces of music that I felt like didn't have a real home yet. So I kind of like fashioned a home for them out of means of necessity and circumstances. There's a piece of music that I released on SoundCloud called Poop Can Be Sexual. And it samples some crazy guy talking about how he fetishizes poop. And it's
That's
it
Zappa as can be. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. It's like Wild Man Fisher type stuff. But
yeah.
anyway, the music itself has a lot of like odd time signatures again, like 5/8. I think I did 13/16 and 7/8. It'll go back and forth between a lot of different time signatures like that. And I even play a guitar solo in 5/8.
Damn, dude. That had to be that had to suck for a while getting that.
It was hard to get accustomed to it, but you get a feel for it eventually.
What was the hack for that? What did you do? Did you have like a mental like
I had a melody in mind, and it focuses it centers around the melody there, and I kind of just
okay.
kind of like explore, so to speak, from there.
Gotcha. Because like was it 5/8? So like 1 2 3 1 2 3 or 1 2 1 2 3.
One
Right?
two one two three one
Okay.
two one two three, but it's a little bit slower. It was like
Okay.
more like 1 2 1 2 3 1 2
Okay.
1 2 3.
That's the hardest part of those puzzles, but also like because it is you can break it up and make it make sense. Then the doing it right and the learning to like naturally convey yourself like you would in four is a completely different experience than how the thinking
Definitely,
of it. Um,
definitely.
I guess the next question I have with that is kind of like, what does your process of like writing or composing look like? Do you like, are you a guy that sits down and works on something every day? Do you take it as inspiration comes? Like, what's that look like for you?
The latter. I take it as inspiration comes, and
Okay.
unfortunately, um, I definitely have forgotten or misplaced way more music than I've ever actually recorded or managed to perform. You know, time restraints, work life, daily life. It takes me away from being able to do that sort of thing. But when I have free time to get my ideas down, recorded, and put them out there, it's always a process of always changing and always evolving. So, in a lot of ways, I never really feel finished with a piece of music individually, but after a certain point, I have to put it out there just to, you know, put something out. Because if I'm such a perfectionist, I'm sitting here constantly changing, constantly revising, then I'll never connect. I'll never be able to spread my music out there, and I don't want to be stagnant.
Right. Well,
But
that's
yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
sorry, but I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, but I always just kind of approach it from the angle of like that it's always evolving and can always change.
That's cool. I mean, then it even goes to like the original demos you sent me, which is now this new record, or this second new record, this
Yep.
penultimate new record. Um, but that's one. It's a really hard like process to have an idea and be like, okay, here it is, it's done. Next thing, especially when like you have a bigger concept, like most of your pieces do, like. So I totally relate to that, and like I totally relate to like just putting it out and moving on, because that's such a like, here's the baby, and you know what I mean. Like it's not an easy process, but like once you get in that flow of it, that makes those ideas like, here they are, next thing, here they are, next thing, and like it's weird that like that kind of ebb and flow and always turning machine of like writing and composing and like playing and coming up with things is oddly kind of like the flow of it, you know?
Yes,
And like,
absolutely.
or at least for myself, ultimately where I kind of want to stride to get to is like this place of putting stuff out, doing the best I can. Here it is, next thing. But that's awesome. Um, so okay, so Furnace will think it'll be about a couple months. What are you when are you thinking about dropping that?
Um, Probably May, April, May, somewhere
Okay.
around then. And I will also be releasing an EP, an instrumental EP, shortly before that, which is called Industrial Archaeology, and
That's sick.
that's more like electronic industrial dance music, I guess you can say.
That sounds badass. That's a cool title, man.
Yeah,
Um, awesome. And then like, okay, so the show in Akron, which is I don't have the details in my head.
it's at the matinee,
Matinee. And what day is that?
March 2nd.
March 2nd. Okay, cool. We'll definitely get this out before then. So, who else is on that bill? I saw there's two other acts.
One group I remember was called the Applewhites. I'd have to go look at the event to see who else was on it.
All right.
One group
So,
was called the Applewhites, and they were kind of like an alt rock group.
Nation of No One, the Applewhites. um, cool, man.
Oh,
And
I'm actually gonna look for it
yeah,
real quick.
let's put a pin in it. I'll chop it up and we'll just plug it in one. Um, and does I guess after that does Whiskey Stills and Hash have anything coming up?
The other hold up before let me shout out the other groups
Okay.
because I found the flyer for it. The other bands were Rent for Cheryl and the Frantic Nancies. The Frantic Nancies, from what I can tell from their Facebook group, is a punk rock group. So
Hell yeah.
at least for some of the tracks off of and whatnot, they probably sound closest to like that kind of stuff. And Whiskey Stills and Hash, right now we are working on an EP.
Okay. Sick. Very cool.
Yeah, it's we had a bandmate unfortunately pass away recently,
Yeah.
and a lot of the songs on this EP are basically just going to be a big tribute to him, and they feature some of his vocals that were sadly kind of absent from our first album. But he has like he sings on the chorus of one of the pieces we're going to be releasing called Grandpa's Juice, And on another song called "Smoke Weed About It," he did a verse for it. We all kind of did a verse for that song. So
Yeah, man, that's intense, but like I think that's a badass way to like pay honor to, you know? And it's really cool that some of those tracks exist to do that.
yeah, yeah, we're actually working on my laptop right now because it was really, really buggy and needed to be defragged and needed a lot of repairs. We actually tried having a recording session recently at our last practice, and it didn't go very well. So that's in the works. We're going to be trying to do like a tribute show for John as well. Andrea, who's our singer, wants to hold it at the Winchester. So as soon as I have more solid details about that, of course, I'll be posting about that on my Facebook page as well.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for reaching out, and I enjoyed diving into Nation of No One's like wide, vast catalog and trying to wrap my brain around it, and
which is only going to keep growing.
But that's the badass part, man. And I've also Doug. I'm losing my words. I also enjoyed. Let me use regular words. I also enjoyed getting the chat with you like this, man. Because like aside from just like gigs and like passing by, it's part of the podcasty thing is I like hearing where everyone's actually coming from. So
yeah, no, it was really enjoyable, and we'd never, because when you're at shows and whatnot, whether it's like loud music or everybody's kind of floating around in their own social groups, we never really had much of a chance to have a one-on-one conversation. So I had a really enjoyable time. This was fun.
Awesome, thanks, man. Cool. Well, we'll wrap it here with that, and what I'll do is I'll chop out a little bit here at the end to make that we didn't forget about the other bands. We knew exactly who they were.
Yeah,
I'll make that seem a little smoother. And then with Whiskey, Stills, and Hash, when you guys are done with this EP, hit me up and like let's get together and do a chat about it, because that's intense, man. And like I think that's
for that one I'll bring along the other band members and we can make it like a bigger thing. So
we can even like meet up in person and like do like a whole spiel with that. Because I remember playing at your guys' first release or second release.
Whiskey, Stills, and Hash only had one release.
Okay, because I remember
officially
playing. It was at that weird bar.
Yeah, it was called the Whiskeyville.
Yeah.
I think it's closed now. I think there was like something wrong with the owner of the place. He was a little out of it the last time we spoke. He was talking about how like he got abducted by aliens and stuff like that.
That sounds like a song. That sounds like an album. Like
yeah.
But yeah, no, I remember playing that show and like I remember doing a solo bit with it. But yeah, when you guys are ready to put that EP out, I'd love to like sit with all you guys and like we can do a whole band one. That'd be cool.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig of the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy.